everyone. Welcome back to the One of Us podcast. We're just excited that you're gathering with us today. Today, we're going to be chatting about worship, our thoughts on worship just musically, and also just different types of worship. And maybe we'll have a take that you didn't anticipate. So I look forward to just this conversation with you guys.
I'm excited too. Okay, well, let's start it off with something a little fun. What is everyone's overall favorite worship song, and what is your current seasonal favorite worship song?
My overall favorite right now, or I guess of all time, my youth pastors, they sang this at church and it just moved me when I heard it. But it's Spirit Speaks by All Sons and Daughters. 10 out of 10. I know it's a pretty old band. When they sang, I was super moved. And then I think right now, seasonally, I know that Christmas was a couple weeks ago, but I still listen to the Christmas tracks, either pentatonics or
Pentatonics.
I know. It's the acapella, honestly.
Hey, they have a good bop. Is it Mary Did You Know?
Mary, did you know?
No. Ah, beautiful.
Anyways, those are my two.
Okay, so my current one is Table for You by Ernestly Etienne. I honestly don't know. I've never heard of him before.
The fact that you had to look at it, how is it that your favorite song?
Not the song title, the artist, because there's no way I would have. It's not my all-time favorite. I just said it's my current seasonal favorite. But my overall favorite one is Here I Am to Worship, just because it's such it just brings back so many memories for me where I'm like, oh, yeah. I just feel like I'm going back to the early 2000s, late 90s, whenever it came out. I don't know. Early 2000s, because that's when I was worshiping.
Okay, I think overall favorite is hard because I just have so many, but I think I want to say Build My Life, the House Fires version. I don't know, this one year when we went to the Christian camp for university, I just wept so much, and I just think about that moment all the time. And I think my seasonal one, Rest on Us by House Fires.
Okay, so for me, the one, since I was super young, when did this song come out? I'm not sure. It's Cornerstone by Hillsong Worship. Just that one has been throughout my life. I've just loved that song. It's just so deep and there's just so much truth to it. And I just remember that would always just make me emotional, that song, even when I was younger. And then currently, a song that we heard when we went to Passion earlier last year, Holy Forever by Chris Tomlin. Just that song, I just love it. And we sang it in church, I think, last weekend.
We did. It was
and
beautiful.
I was like, yes. I felt that song coming on. And I was like, we love this. So that's the one I've been really enjoying recently.
All right. What's your guys' opinions between the difference between praise and worship?
I think praise might be an outward expression and worship might be the internal reverence of the Lord within different contexts. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, because when I think of worship, I obviously think of it in a music sense, you're singing to the Lord. Yeah, I think praise, you can say praise the Lord. You don't have to be singing. I do feel like it is, at the end of the day, still a heart thing.
And I think they're interconnected, obviously, because praise is gratitude, right, for God. But it's tied to worship, obviously, because you can be worshiping in reverence for the Lord and have just gratitude for what he's done.
Yeah, what I got down here is kind of when you think of, at least when I think of praise, it's always in a good sense, praising God for something grand that has occurred in your life. But worship can exist in the valleys as well as the mountaintop, right? So I think it's awesome because I hear a lot of people confuse praise and worship a lot, where people only worship God on the mountaintop, but when they're in the valleys, they don't. But when people explain worship only on the mountaintops of their life, I feel like they're more expressing praise for God, not necessarily worship.
I think we covered the difference between praise and worship, and I think you guys did a good job at differentiating the two and even finding similarities. But in your own words of how it really pertains to you guys, how would you describe worship? What is worship to you, and what is worship for you? What does it do for you?
For me, I see it as focusing on God and just kind of spending that time with him and singing out loud truths on how we feel. Granted, not every song is some are more biblically accurate, some are not. But for me, That's why I like the seasonal question. I think that there are songs that do pertain to your season, and you can be singing about your season to the Lord.
I think for me, when I think of worship, I think of just being in awe of God's character and having surrender to Him for who He is as Lord of my life. And so, worship for me is just a moment to recenter myself, especially in like the low moments, like what Juan was saying. In all moments, right? Not only going to God when we want something or need something or when things are great, but in all times to just be like, regardless of what's happening in my life, to you be the glory, Lord. So that's kind of the posture I take. And you even see people in the Bible like Job. Sometimes when you go through the ringer, a true test of character and righteousness is going to the Lord in worship, even through those really difficult trials.
I think for me, worship has to do with sense of humility. I think a lot of Hebrews 46:10, where it says, "Be still and know that I am God." Like the Hebrew word "be still" is harpu. So "be still" is more so saying to let go. And what is to let go is to let go of your circumstance, of the sense of humanity that you're experiencing in the world. So I think a lot of times worship is necessarily bringing yourself to the feet of the cross and surrendering all that's kind of burdening you. And that's why I said, like, sometimes worship could be done on the mountaintops, right? Like worshiping God for all that He's done, but also worshiping God in your challenges to kind of give you strength and humility through those trials.
Think in those seasons, like for me, when I like start crying, I feel like I physically and like spiritually feel everything just kind of leaving.
Is that during sad girl hours? What is sad girl hours for you? Sad boy hours for me is around 2 a.m.
Why are you up at 2 a.m.?
I'm not doing that every single day.
Have you ever
But
heard that trend? Like in high school, there'd be like sad boy hours, and I'd ask my friend, I'm like, "What hours of that exist?" And they're like, "Oh, like 2 a.m. when you're like staring into darkness, contemplating your life."
Mine would be at 10:30 because that's when I have to go to bed, and I don't want that day to end because I'm like, wait, I still want to do stuff.
You're like, dang, body needing rest.
Yeah, I would say worship for me is a moment to kind of recenter my life, really to think and process. Because when I worship, one thing I love to do is I like to grab my journal, and for me, I like to pace. I actually like to pace back and forth, but it's such a great time to just sing the words, but really kind of soak in what the words are saying, not just singing it to sing it like a routine, but really be intentional with what it's saying and the purpose behind it, and really just kind of allowing God to take my praises and hoping that He can hear my praises and just kind of finding that peace. It's really a moment to kind of recenter and just be with God.
What are you guys' thoughts on different kinds of quote unquote worship music, Christian music? You know, there's everything from like hymns to like gospel, rap, contemporary.
Well, contemporary has been around since like 1970s. So it's only been like 55 years of contemporary music, which
Mhm.
to some people seem a lot, but there's still a lot of people out there who remember when contemporary music didn't exist. This is what I think, because I actually saw, I don't know where I saw this, but I remember I had this conversation with a group of guys where we were talking about contemporary music. And I think like there's like pros and cons, right? I think the pros to the new contemporary music is that it's more relatable. The sense of worship, like when people kind of sing along in worship, there's a higher sense of relatability, but there's also more pitfalls because it's, I don't know how to explain it, but like hymns are derived a lot from psalms or like proverbs and stuff like that, and contemporary music are as well, but contemporary music is more of your personality put in it, of the artist. So like I know that a lot of people find controversy with certain songs because they might not sound, I guess, biblically accurate.
Okay, I have a question. It might be a bit of a hot take. Sorry, Tati, don't mean to steal your thunder. But we're talking about different types of genres. What is your opinion on Screamo? Because there is Screamo worship. Do you think Screamo music can be worship music?
I think if they're screaming praises unto the Lord, yes. But if it's like nonsensical, then no.
But what if that reaches a different crowd where they like that crowd? They think it's relaxing. That's how they love to praise the Lord, is by that screamo that's like, rah. that type of stuff.
That's what he's saying. I think he's saying it is. But if you're just saying random stuff, then no. But if it's meant to worship too, I think there's also a distinction between Christian music and worship music, because there are plenty of songs that you sing them and you're like, okay, this is a Christian song, but it's not about worshiping or praising the Lord. I don't know if you guys have noticed that difference too. So I think it depends. I think plenty of things can be Christian music. It's just, is it like worship music? Is it something that you would just, is it like a prayer almost of your soul as you're like singing it?
Okay, well, I have a genuine question. So I remember a couple years ago when Reckless Love came out by Corey Osbury, there was a big controversy because people said that God's love isn't reckless. So some churches, like, they would sing instead of reckless love, they'd say like God's perfect love. So what do you think about churches who they take some of the artists' contemporary music and changes it to what they feel like is more of a biblically accurate representation of the Bible?
Diverting from the truth is a slippery slope, right? Like, you start with a little thing and you're like, oh, this isn't that bad, and then you end up being way off the mark later on. So I get the heart and like wanting to redirect, wanting to keep it to the truth, wanting to change certain phrases that maybe that specific community just doesn't think is accurate. But at the same time, I think, just personally, sometimes I think certain things can be a little extra. I understand the heart behind it, and I understand the importance and the vitality of being centered and firm on the actual truth and knowing what words we are speaking.
I would agree with you, Chris. I think it really does come back to the intentions of the heart, because I'm sure when that person wrote that song, The Reckless Love of God, the thing that probably didn't come to mind is, wow, let me make a song that's biblically inaccurate and doesn't glorify. I'm pretty sure that's not what they were doing. I think they were just trying to like express his love in a way, and that was what they decided to use. But I can also respect churches from wanting to make sure that they're sharing the truth and the full truth, and letting people know and understand that God's love is not reckless. It is perfect.
Wasn't there another moment like that where it was like a sloppy wet kiss, unforeseen kiss?
I'm still team sloppy
Okay.
wet kiss because unforeseen kiss makes no sense. No one gets kissed unforeseenly.
See, the sloppy wet kiss is not biblically inaccurate. I think that was just a change based on preference of like, do we want to talk about all these sloppy wet kisses on the stage at church? But I don't think
know.
it's
But that makes
bad.
no sense, because when you say heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss, it's like saying like God had never planned
Yeah, that
the events on
change
earth.
made it worse. That was almost like made it worse. Like,
I thought the sloppy wet kiss was like kind of like a fun, like energetic way of just being like, I love you. So that's how I saw it. The unforeseen kiss, I'm just like, yo. When churches do that, I'm secretly singing sloppy wet kiss like underneath, because I'm like, yo, come on, this version's better, and you know what?
So some churches, like, I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to throw anyone down there, but they make a lot of music. But some people are like, I don't listen to any of their music because if I listen to their music, then I'm supporting them and I'm giving them money to propagate a message I don't agree with. What would you say to those individuals?
Well, because I've had this conversation before and I have thought that in the past. Not that I like fell into that trap. I kind of just disagree with it because you could be giving even worse organizations money, and it's more like how we keep saying the intentionality. And if that's something you believe still aligns with the word and it helps your relationship with the Lord, he can still use anything for good.
do you think any of the songs that these big churches make, the like kind of controversial ones that we're discussing, do you think they make anybody stumble?
I could be wrong. I haven't seen any firsthand.
Stumble in what way? Like, what do you mean?
Like stumble or lead them astray? Or like, do you think people who maybe are new to the faith and listen to these songs, like, do you think it's giving a false perception of truth, the gospel, the character of the Lord?
So I have a pastor back home. He kind of said this on Sunday service once, because, the church at that time was, I would say, very traditionalist. Like, there was a lot of old people and they had hardliner views, and they were kind of in that belief that if you listen to songs from churches that you don't necessarily agree with biblically, that you're supporting like the wrong agenda. And he kind of came up on stage and he kind of broke that sense of traditionalism by kind of saying like, hey, we need to look at every worship song as its own entity, right? Which I agree with, because I've never met a single person say, oh my gosh, I love this band, I have to hear what their pastor is saying. Like, never. I've never heard anyone ever say that they listen to a pastor because of the worship music. And I think that's like also a sense of idolization, where it's like your heart to hear the word of God should be derived by Jesus and the knowledge and the sanctification to be more like Jesus. If it's anything rooted in like music or something that's not God, I think that, it's misplaced. But to kind of answer your question, Crystal, the pastor at my old church, he kind of came up on stage and said, we need to look at every song independently and just know that if the song points to Christ and is uplifting and people feel the Holy Spirit, then there's nothing wrong to it. And I think that's how I feel. If a song is from a church that has questionable beliefs, but their song isn't biblically inaccurate, then I don't think it would cause anybody to stumble. But if a song is a little bit misleading with God's promises or his truths, then I do think it is misleading, because you're not really worshiping to God, you're worshiping to a bunch of falsehoods.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's why I posed that question, because I was like, if the answer to those questions are yes for a large percentage of people, then I think that we need to kind of maybe see what we're listening to ensure that other people aren't misled. You can't control how people are going to react or interpret everything you say or every song that you put out there. I think what you're saying is so true, like seeing them individually and assessing it for yourself. And if there's general truth to all of them, I don't see why there's an issue. And most of the times, I don't know if people are like me. I know we have different people here in terms of their knowledge of music. But for me, I don't even know who's singing the song 99% of the time. I'm just worshiping. I'm like, I love that song. Right now, I couldn't have told you that Chris Tomlin sang Holy Forever. I had to look it up. Like, I just like the song. And I was like, oh, what's that song I love to sing? So things like that, where it's like the worship songs aren't necessarily always tied to the specific worship leader or the pastor.
I think we have to take the people out of it too, because at the end of the day, like, everyone's going to fall short of the glory of, God. And like, for me, I don't really, like, there's some Christian artists and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love their music, so I'll probably listen to those groups more. But at the end of the day, like, I look at the songs individually.
Do you guys think working out can be worship?
I'd say yes. It's in the right context, right? Like, if you're telling yourself, like, I'm going to dedicate my body, my temple to the Lord in this fashion by, denying my body like certain pleasures and like working for an optimal body structure or whatever, however you want to phrase it, I feel like, that is a form of worship. And I think other forms of worship exist outside of music, which I think is awesome. But I think that music is really special because it's something that can be done communally. I think that's why everyone really loves it, but there's definitely other forms of worship outside of music.
I would agree that working out is a form of worship. Again, I think it comes down to intention, because some people might work out because they want people to look at them, or they want to have the best body. They're like, I want to make sure I'm looking good in this or that, and obviously you want to make sure you're looking good and stuff, but whatever. I think the intention is, I want to take care of what I have.
I heard once from a friend of ours, Hope, who was talking about just mobility. And that's the first time I've ever heard anything like that, was when she mentioned it. She was like, yeah, I move my body like as a way to like worship and praise God for like giving me this body, for like giving me health in this temple, just like gratitude.
So what are your guys' thoughts on, when you go to church and just kind of like the production aspect of that? Because I know some people think doing too much production is more for show and entertainment, and others might not even care.
Because I get what people mean. Like, if it's like a concert, I understand what people are saying. But it's like Victoria was saying earlier, it's like, what is kind of like your heart in the matter? So what I would say is, if the production value and everything going into it points to Christ and not the congregation, then I think it doesn't matter.
I was going to say that God gave us all gifts and talents for a reason. I don't see why we shouldn't use them. To some, he gave like amazing vocals, right, to like lead a congregation in worship. To others, the ability to understand how shots work, like what shot should be best for this video, or understanding sounds or tempos or different things that are involved in production. And so I just think that we should use them. Like I think that's a beautiful thing. I think a higher production doesn't necessarily mean less reverence.
What do you think about churches that might not have the budgets for those high production? Like, are they, I don't want to say less likely to get church attendance, but do you feel like they don't really have that advantage that maybe a more put together church does?
I don't think so, because I know we've even attended churches who they were super into hymnals and not a high production, like everything's like super low key, and they had great attendance. It just depends, like what Juan was saying, there's different believers for different environments, and that's just the environment that they thrived in. And so I think that's fine. I think maybe the younger generation is more drawn to maybe a little bit of higher production, and I don't think that's like superficial or anything. I just think that's kind of the culture and the generation. Like we're just big, loud, like that's like our vibe that gets us hyped and still in worship.
And I mean, at the end of the day, you have to start somewhere. Not every church starts off with an amazing bomb worship team. Sometimes you have to start small. Sometimes it's just a guitar, then you get a singer, and then you get a cajon, and you grow.
You know, it's funny. I actually was watching this video of one of the bigger producers, and it's really crazy how people are so talented. He was talking about how Ed Sheeran went out and did like his concert and comes back to the room and is like, all right, I already finished the song in my head. So like as he's out there performing, he's also thinking about how to finish a song, which is like insane. But yeah, that's like natural talent. Even me going into the studio and just kind of seeing the process. People make it look easy. It's definitely not easy, but I think it's just one of those things that the Lord just kind of gives you with. So
I wish I could multitask like this, because a sis cannot. I cannot do two things at once. I'm so scatterbrained.
All right, folks. A great discussion, but you already know. What time is it? It's hot take time with Tati.
you don't need to raise your hands to truly worship.
That's controversial, Tati.
I would agree, because sometimes to worship, you need to get on your knees. You get in a humble form.
But what about those people that don't move at all? Like they just stand there kind of like straight.
I don't want to be someone who like judges somebody based off like body posture, because it's kind of rude. I do think though that while you're worshiping, it's like what we said in the beginning, right? The difference between praise and worship. With worship, you have to humble yourself and give it all to Christ. For some people, that's raising both their hands in surrender, while other people is, getting on their knees in reverence of Christ. But I think, again, it's like a heart issue. So I guess my answer to you, Tati, is it depends.
I don't think it necessarily diminishes someone's worship, but I mean, just someone who's more like engaged physically, I guess, during worship, it's hard for me not to be like moving, doing things, because that's just how I guess, relate and worship personally. Yeah, I think some people maybe like scared, like I think some people when they first come to church, like they're like, why is everyone acting weird and doing all this stuff? So maybe they just, I think it's a comfort level too. I've seen people who, when I first met and they were super new in their faith, they didn't move, didn't raise their hands, just kind of stood there during worship. And then you see them slowly over the years, like start to mouth the lyrics, start to put their hands here. Have you seen those videos where it's like you start off like
the transition
here, like super low, and then like your hands slowly get higher, like over time. And so I think that's a part of it too. Maybe it's just like the growth of a Christian, but then I guess some people aren't into that either. So I don't think it necessarily matters a whole lot, as long as like you're in complete surrender in that moment.
This is an either or. Okay, worship at church is too long or is it too short?
Ooh, I think it's, again, another dependable question. I think it's spirit led. That's what it should be. But I mean, this is a topic for another day, but I think that sometimes church has been so structured that most people know what they're going to get, right? You go into church, you sing a song, you get morning updates, you sing another song, then you get another update, then the sermon, then you close with the response song, right? So I think that if the Spirit of God is pushing for just worship to encapsulate the whole evening, it should. Do I think it'll ever happen at most like services today in America? No. So my answer again to you, Tati, it depends.
This feels like the Goldilocks going to different beds. Isn't that, wait, does that exist? Like one was too firm, one was too.
Yes, Crystal, that's Goldilocks.
Okay, I felt like you guys were looking at me as if I was making up that story.
I don't know what that is.
Oh.
Wait,
Okay,
what do you mean
let
you
me-
don't know? Wait, Tati, you don't know what
You never heard the story
Goldilocks
of
and the Three
Goldilocks?
Bears?
No.
Tati, what the heck? How have you not heard of Goldilocks and the Three Bears?
It's because she's Cuban. They didn't have
She-
that technology in the island.
She went to school in Los
Tati was
Angeles.
born in LA.
Said
Either
who?
that or my
Okay.
brain has just erased it.
Okay,
Probably
real
just
quick, let me just do a quick little sticky summary. Goldilocks stumbles upon a house. She goes inside. She sees some bowls of porridge. She eats the first porridge. It was too hot. She eats the second one. It was too cold. She eats the third one. It was just right. Then she goes and she sits on a chair. The first one's too hard. The second one was too soft. The third one was just right. Then she got a little tired, so she went to the bed. The first bed was too hard. The second bed was too soft. The third one was just right. Well, 3 bears came home and they're all complaining. Someone ate my porridge. Someone was sitting in my chair. And then the little baby bear, because it was his bear, was the mom, dad, and baby. The baby bear is like, there's a girl sleeping in my bed. So obviously she gets scared and she runs away.
I thought she got eaten up.
That is the big bad wolf.
I'm just kidding.
Okay. I'm curious to know for people listening if you knew all of those details of the story, because I'd never heard the chair part. I only ever heard the porridge and the bed part. So we're learning something new. Juan learned the she got eaten at the end part. So it's confusing.
She didn't get eaten. She got scared and ran away.
So all that to say is I was going to say, for me, having like those 4 songs feels just right. But maybe that's because I've been conditioned and that's what I know to expect, like what Juan was saying. But I'm down for a 2-hour worship sesh. Maybe I'm less down for it to be like one song. That feels a little weird. But I feel like the 4, because I feel like it's usually 4, like 3 or 4, it's pretty good.
Okay, I know we're supposed to end, but I do have one more. Not hot take, just a question. I don't know if you guys have heard, like, again, I'm not going to say any churches, but like some claim that they do kind of these things to emotionally manipulate you. Like, you never heard those? So like some churches will purposely turn down the temperature so you feel like the chills and things like that. What do you think about? You never heard of that?
I've never heard of that. That's
I have to
kinda
send you
weird.
this documentary because
I'm here for the vibe setting, like turning down the lights where you can just focus and you're not looking at everything that's going on around you. Things like that. But the fact that they're trying to force you to have physical reactions, that's a little weird.
I will say there's some aspects of production that I would never know. Like I remember one time at church, 2 of our friends who work on production, they were like, oh my gosh, I forgot to turn the light red when the pastor got on stage. And it just threw the vibe off. And I told myself that light could have been orange or green or black. And I think I would have never noticed.
Because maybe these vibe things are items that are parts of production that we would never notice, like what you're saying. But maybe it has an effect, but we're just not realizing because we're not seeing the intention there.
All right, people, you heard it here. We had a great talk about worship, and hopefully you guys were able to learn something. And if there's any topics that we didn't cover, please, by all means, post it down below. But before you guys sign off, do put in the comments your favorite story as a child. So we covered Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, but if you made it to the end, then share another one that maybe people haven't heard of. But until then, have an amazing week, have a safe week, and go get your worship on, whether it's at home, in the car, on a walk, at the gym, reading a book. I don't know. Go worship the Lord, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
also we do have a playlist on Spotify of our favorite worship songs.
Ooh.
Yes, check
Hook
it
it
out.
up.
It'll
Hook
be
it
linked
up.
down below.